Gauss nosso que estás no céu, junto ao Fischer, perdoar e achar causalidade em todas as nossas correlações. Os box plots nossos de cada dia nos dai hoje e que identifique os outliers para que possamos eliminá-los. Amém.
Exponencial, né? Tecnologia exponencial, né? Modelagem estatística, a gente sempre vai errar. Hello, guys and ladies. We have a special live today. Yeah, it's a international live with Deepak Singhania. It's a professor from Indian Institute. Yeah, and his assessor is Marco Severo. And you can introduce to us him, please, mestre.
Claro, pessoal, tudo bem? Bom, grande Thiago, um prazer revê-lo aqui nas lives. Fazia um tempo que eu não participava e hoje nós temos um convidado muito especial, meu amigo pessoal, professor Deepak, do Indian Institute of Technology, Gandhinagar, na Índia. Ele é um economista e trabalha com métodos de inferência causal, trabalha com análise econométrica, mas eu vou deixar ele se apresentar para todos vocês, tá bom? Hi, Deepak. I was talking about you to our audience, so feel free to introduce yourself to the members of the channel of Estatidados.
Thank you, Marcos. Thank you, Thiago, for having me here. So, hi, everyone out there. I'm Deepak Singhania. I'm from India. I'm currently working as an assistant professor at one of the premier engineering institutes in India. It's called Indian Institute of Technology. It's in Gujarat, Gujarat state of India, in Gandhinagar. I did my PhD in 2017 in the field of economics from the University of California, Riverside. After that, I worked as a research fellow and then a senior fellow at an organization called Evidence of Policy Design, where we would work with policymakers both in India and Nepal to, help policy. So that organization was earlier associated with Harvard, but then now it is associated with Yale, and now it's called Inclusion Economics India Center. So yeah, I'm happy to be here and happy to get into this conversation on causal inference methods.
Thiago, você acha que vale a pena fazer uns highlights da tradução? Porque nós fizemos assim na UFG, aí você que manda, né?
Pode ser, por favor.
Tá. Deepak, we're going to do the same structure as we did in UFG. I'm going to translate the main highlights of your...
Yes.
Okay, of your introduction. Bom, o professor Deepak, ele trabalha como professor assistente no Indian Institute of Technology, em Gandhinagar, na Índia, fica no estado de Gujarat. E é um sistema de universidades federais, né, localizadas em diferentes estados, especificamente essa fica em Gujarat. Ele é doutor em economia na Universidade da Califórnia, em Riverside, e ele trabalha com análise de impacto em políticas públicas, possui algumas pesquisas sobre o Brasil, inclusive, uma das suas pesquisas mais famosas é a análise do efeito causal de uma política de concessão de crédito.
Oh, great. So, it's an honor to us have you in Estatidados, yeah? And let's talk about causal inference, yeah? What do you think is causal inference? There is a difference between correlation and causation?
Thank you, Thiago, for that question. I think that's a good question to begin with. So causal inference is a very fascinating field, and it has become quite big in the field of economics and also in other social sciences field. So the basic idea behind causal inference is to get at the truth, to reduce bias, okay? just for non-econometric or non-statistics kind of audience out there. It's basically to reduce bias in our understanding of relationship, any kind of relationship. For instance, does increasing education, does that improve income? And if so, by how much, right? What role does it play? So it goes way beyond a simple correlation where you put something on x-axis and something on y-axis. You draw a scatter plot, and just because you have put something on x-axis doesn't make it an independent variable, right? You put education on x-axis and income on y-axis. You can't immediately conclude that education is affecting income. I could very well switch the axis, put income on x-axis and education on y-axis, and argue that it's not education that's affecting income, rather it's the other way around. So another very interesting way to think of it is every day in the newspapers, in the media, we see a lot of such graphs. We see bar graphs, scatter plots, line graphs, all these relationships out there that try to show some sort of relationship between two variables. And they claim that, well, we did this kind of intervention, and that's why something has changed, right? But causal inference the methods of causal inference goes much beyond that, because there could be a lot more, hidden in that simple pictorial relationship than what we see, on those pictures. Even running a simple regression, for instance, all those who are aware of regression, just running a simple regression where you regress y on x doesn't necessarily mean that you are getting at a causal relationship from x to y, because there could be a lot going on within that regression that needs to be accounted for. So causal inference is really, if you think of a lab setting, a laboratory setting. So causal inference method, allows you to get into a kind of a lab setting in your statistical world, where of other things, a lot of other omitted, variables that could be driving the main relationship. For instance, education and income. So if that's the main relationship that you are trying to understand, there could be a lot of other things that could be driving that relationship, and causal inference helps you get away from that. The other one final point I want to make here is that you also want to be careful about spurious correlation, right? Spurious correlation is something that could be just, out there without any meaning. For instance, there are a lot of interesting and funny examples on spurious correlation that show, for instance, number of Facebook users and Greek debt, right? You just go out and search for spurious correlation, funny examples. There's no end to it. So you have to be careful about, these kind of issues when you are establishing relationship. There's a lot of underlying meaning attached to it. Yeah. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
Bom, deixa eu fazer aqui um apanhado do que foi apresentado pelo professor Deepak, né? Acho que ele se concentrou na discussão entre correlação e causalidade. Então, quem está acompanhando a gente e lê os livros de estatística aplicada, os primeiros capítulos geralmente se debruçam sobre essa questão. Essa discussão de causalidade ficou grande na área de economia e em outras áreas de ciências sociais aplicadas, principalmente porque vários usuários de técnicas de métodos de inferência causal com dados secundários ganharam o prêmio Nobel nos últimos anos de economia. O principal objetivo é reduzir o viés na compreensão dos relacionamentos. Ele deu um exemplo, né, de alguns relacionamentos, mas um relacionamento muito... quando eu falo relacionamento, é relacionamento entre variáveis. Muito frequente na economia entre educação e renda individual. Então, será que se você aumentar a educação, você tem um aumento na renda individual? E se isso acontecer, como acontece? O pensamento com o método de inferência causal ele vai um pouco além da correlação, e ele usou uma analogia bem interessante. Não é porque você atribui uma variável como dependente lá no seu modelo que isso vai determinar a causalidade quando você estima o modelo, até porque você tem a base de dados, né? Se você colocar a variável X no lugar da variável Y e vice-versa, né? A associação vai ser a mesma, né? A correlação vai ser a mesma. A nossa compreensão, falar nossa, das pessoas não familiarizadas, né? Assim, muito familiarizadas, o público em geral, acaba que a mídia e os canais de televisão acabam nos levando a fazer interpretações equivocadas, porque eles apresentam de forma muito simplória, né? Assim, se você fizer isso, vai acontecer aquilo. Então, se você rodar uma regressão e mexer na variável x, vai acontecer isso na variável y. Só que não é tão simples assim. Muitas questões devem ser consideradas, ainda mais para um economista, ainda mais com pessoas que trabalham com dados de ciência social aplicada, em que você não tem a possibilidade de fazer experimento. Né? Não um experimento, por exemplo, eu não posso, como economista, né, chegar e falar assim, não, eu vou reduzir o investimento em determinada política pública nessa região e vou aumentar nessa outra região para saber qual vai ser o impacto. Você não pode fazer isso porque você está prejudicando as pessoas. Né? Mas existem técnicas e estatísticas que conseguem fazer esses controles numa lógica semelhante, que se aproxime à abordagem experimental de laboratório. Tá? E a última parte da fala, ele deu um destaque importante sobre correlação espúria. A correlação espúria, qualquer analista de dados precisa tomar cuidado, pois ela está escondida nos dados e um pesquisador ou alguém que trabalha com análise de dados precisa estar atento a isso. Existem técnicas para a identificação da correlação espúria.
Great, great. Thank you very much. It's fantastic. We never have a talk about causal inference in stat dados. Yeah, it's the first time as you is the first live either. Yeah, it's very nice. And the first time we never forgiven. Yeah.
So, é a primeira vez que isso é tratado aqui para a galera do canal?
É a primeira vez que é tratado no Stat Dados e é a primeira live dele também. Né? Ele nunca fez live que ele falou.
Oh, okay. He's highlighting that is the first time that we are talking in Stat Dados about causation, and it's your first live also in your life.
So é a primeira vez, a gente nunca esquece.
I'm glad.
So yeah. What's the idea of counterfactual?
Okay, great. You bring that up. So when you are thinking of causal inference, the first thing that you need to understand is the idea of counterfactual. So just like in a laboratory experiment, think of a medical field, right? Any medicine that's tested, you always compare a treatment group and a control group, right? But in the field of social science, you don't typically have the right kind of control group to compare with. You don't have the apples to apples comparison, right? So first, you need to understand the idea of counterfactual to understand how to create a valid control group. Okay, so the idea of counterfactual is basically what would happen, to a particular group in the absence, if there's no treatment available. So in the absence of an intervention, in the absence of a treatment, what would the outcome look like? So for instance, think of Bolsa Familia, which is a popular, social program in Brazil. And if you want to really assess how Bolsa Familia come out of poverty or improve their education, improve their livelihoods, improve their health, then what you really need is to know what would have been their lives, those who were exposed to Bolsa Familia, what their lives would have looked like in the absence of Bolsa Familia. Now, you can never know that, right? Because, and that's the idea of parallel world as well. If you have seen, a series like Fringe, for instance, on Netflix, right? So, the idea of parallel world does not exist in real life, and hence, you can't really have that kind of counterfactual. But it's important to understand the idea of counterfactual, because when you create a control group which acts like a counterfactual to help you give the right kind of comparison, such that you're comparing apples to apples, that's where it becomes important. So counterfactual is basically what would have happened in the absence of the treatment to the outcomes for a particular set of individuals, particular set of group, households. It can be any level of treatment that we could be talking about here. Okay, yeah. So that's I hope Marcos can help us translate here. Thanks. Yeah.
Please.
Yes. Bom, vamos lá. Contrafactual é um termo muito usado na área de métodos de inferência causal, Então, imagine, por exemplo, que você é um pesquisador da área médica e vai testar um medicamento. E as pessoas estão com febre. Esse exemplo eu adoro dar em sala de aula, porque você pega dois grupos balanceados, ou seja, os dois grupos são estatisticamente iguais. Para um grupo você fala que está dando remédio, mas está dando placebo. Para o outro grupo você dá efetivamente um remédio. Se os grupos são estatisticamente iguais, se as amostras são aleatórias, basta você comparar a variável de resposta, que é a temperatura, antes e depois dos dois grupos, para identificar se houve uma efetividade do remédio. Essa é a lógica experimental. Agora, isso não está à disposição do pesquisador de ciência social aplicada, né? De quem trabalha com política pública, quem trabalha com economia, porque você não consegue comparar maçã com maçã sempre. Esse é o principal problema, né? E aí, a ideia do contrafactual, a definição do contrafactual é a seguinte: o que aconteceria com determinado grupo de controle na ausência do tratamento. E aí ele deu o exemplo do Bolsa Família. Então, imagine, por exemplo, um programa como Bolsa Família, ou qualquer programa de política pública, onde as pessoas vão receber algum incentivo, né? Ele usou Bolsa Família porque é um dos mais famosos aí, programas sociais. Então, a ideia é o que aconteceria com as pessoas que estão recebendo esse programa na ausência, né, do Bolsa Família, por exemplo. A gente não sabe. Não sabe porque você, como pesquisador da área de ciência social aplicada, você simplesmente não pode suprimir, não. Esse grupo de pessoas ele não vai receber. Eles podem receber, mas eles não vão receber porque eu quero ver o que vai acontecer na ausência, né? Você, como cientista social aplicado, você não pode fazer. Mas a ideia é você criar um mundo paralelo por meio de técnicas analíticas em que te permita inferir o que aconteceria com aquele grupo, né, se eles não estivessem recebendo o tratamento. Então, é importante compreender a ideia do contrafactual, porque isso garante que o pesquisador, de fato, pesquisador da área de ciência social aplicada, de fato, consiga comparar maçã com maçã. Isso é muito difícil.
To introduce a bias, yeah?
Excuse me?
To not introduce a bias, yeah?
Yeah, to not incur in a potential bias.
Yeah.
The idea of counterfactual is to reduce the probability of incurring in a bias, right, Deepak?
Great. So
it's basically the idea is.
Oh, sorry.
The idea is to basically have an apples to apples comparison and not an apples to oranges, right? So, for instance, let me give you a simpler example. You would think that those who go to college, right, have better life than those who don't go to college, or have better, incomes than those who don't go to college, and hence everyone should go to college. That would be a conclusion, right? But then we don't account for the fact that those who have gone to college are different kind of individuals compared to those who have not gone to college. So that comparison is not apples to apples comparison, because these are two very different set of individuals for various reasons. The ones who went to college, maybe they are more motivated, or for certain kind of college, like engineering degrees, they are more motivated, for instance, or they come from a different family backgrounds. They belong to different geographic regions of the country. So for various reasons, it could be that you're seeing that effect of college on income. It could be those other variables, like their own motivation levels, their own, grit, or the region that they belong to, the family background, all of those things that could be driving that effect that you are talking about, right? So that's the key thing that you have to keep in mind, that comparing apples to apples is important. And in this case, when you're just comparing college goers to those who didn't go to college, that comparison could be an apple to orange comparison.
É para evitar viagem de seleção também, né, mestre?
Exato. Ele deu um exemplo interessante, que é um exemplo bem característico, né, dessa área, que a gente tende a acreditar na hora, as pessoas que fazem determinada que a gente chama de college, né, que é universidade, vão ter maiores ganhos em rendimentos, por exemplo. E aí a gente pensa na causalidade, que é aquela universidade que está direcionando isso. Mas peraí, não necessariamente, porque só o fato daquelas pessoas passarem ou se inscreverem são algumas variáveis, né? Algumas variáveis que determinam essa diferença. Então, a ideia do contrafactual é você, de fato, conseguir separar maçã e comparar maçã com maçã que é uma preocupação comum da estatística.
Great. So we have some asks. Andrés said, it is possible to computationally simulate counterfactual words in R and Python. How is the type of model is validated?
Okay, great. Thank you for that question. So first of all, counterfactuals is not a real thing. You can never have a counterfactual, and hence we rely on control group, right? So counterfactual by definition is what would happen in the absence of treatment. We can never know that, right? So we create control groups, right? Now, maybe at some point when we discuss the methods, maybe I can talk about the different methods of causal inference, and that will make it more clear, right? So there are different kinds of methods that exist to help us create the control groups. It's not really about the software. It's not about R. It's not about Python. It's about Stata as such. It's more about the setting, the context that we are talking about, right? There are like if is it okay to go into methods right now, Thiago? Since this question came up. Okay, great.
Sure.
So I would like to divide the methods of creating control group or getting at causal inference, into three different types of methods. One is non-experimental, the other is experimental. So these are two extremes. And then in between, you have the quasi-experimental methods, right? So the non-experimental methods are the traditional statistical methods where you compare someone who went to college with someone who didn't go to college without any predetermined ability to give them treatment or not. So basically, you are simply comparing their averages, their means, right? So this is, it's like someone gets the program, someone does not get the program, you just compare them without any careful thought process into the selection of the control group, right? It's just with and without. The other method could be someone did not get before and after. So think of a household who gets Progressa in year X and did not have it in a year before X, in X minus 1. You just compare them before and after, right? So these are non-experimental methods, which is, by the way, fine to begin with, and it's a good tool to have when you don't have the causal inference methods, flexibility at your hand. So those are non-experimental methods where you don't know how the assignment of the treatment was done. You don't have any control over that. Okay, so you just compare with or without treatment or before and after the treatment, right? The other extreme of the method is the gold standard method, experimental methods. These are randomized controlled trials, right? So these are also called natural experiments. So these basically come from the field of medical science, where you would give pills, the actual pills to a set of patients randomly, and the ones who did not get the actual pills, they would get a placebo pill for comparison. So what randomization does by design is it basically eliminates all the differences on average between the two groups, the one who got the pills and the one who did not get the pills. Or think of randomizing on treatment, and the remaining is the control, right? When you divide groups randomly into treatment and control group, by design you have on average similar kind of groups you're comparing, assuming that there has been no other treatment during the period of your treatment, right? So that's the gold standard method. That's a natural experiment method called randomized controlled trials, right? The third kind of method is quasi-experimental method. Okay, now I won't go into the details of all the methods within that, but there's a host of methods within quasi-experimental. The popular ones are difference in difference, regression discontinuity, and instrumental variable, typically in the order of its strength. Okay, instrumental variable being one of the most strong ones, then regression discontinuity, little closer to instrumental variable, and then difference in difference. There are other methods as well, by the way. So the idea of these methods is to help you, sort of identify in a particular setting, do you have the right kind of control group or not? So it's not, then you can take the data to your software, whichever you love, like I love Stata, you might love R or Python, right? So whichever software you love, you can take the data and you can define who your treatment and control groups are. But having those treatment and control groups is more of a context based, and it's more of a setting based idea than a software based idea. Okay, you need to understand that these methods to be able to detect these control and treatment groups.
It's not about software.
It's not about software. Yeah.
Ok. So,
Tiago, posso fazer um destaque que foi muito
claro,
importante
faz aí.
Esses destaques. Então, vamos lá. Sobre a pergunta, é André? Acho que foi do André.
André Timóteo.
Isso, André Timóteo. Então, o Deepak falou, o professor Deepak, que o contrafactual não é algo real, né? Porque você está perguntando uma coisa que você não sabe, que é o que aconteceria na ausência do tratamento. E você não tem como saber isso, então você recorre a algumas técnicas, né? E existem várias técnicas, vários métodos, e essas técnicas não têm efetivamente a ver com o software que você está usando, que é tipo R, Python, Stata, o que quer que seja, né? Tem mais a ver com o contexto. Uma boa definição que o professor utilizou, ele dividiu os tipos de método condicionado à capacidade do analista de dados ou pesquisador em criar grupos de controle. Então, primeiro, tem as técnicas não experimentais, que vai ser só com objetivo de apresentação. Então, eu tenho 2 grupos e eu quero simplesmente comparar a média desses 2 grupos. Isso é basicamente correlacional, não é experimental. Existem as técnicas experimentais, que é o padrão ouro, né, que é o gold standard, que é o mais famoso é o Randomized Control Trial, que é o RCT, que é como se fosse um teste de medicamento, né? Eu vou testar um medicamento, eu tenho controle, tenho habilidade para dividir em grupo de tratamento, grupo de controle, e saber o efeito do medicamento que eu estou testando. Agora, tem as técnicas quase experimentais, que são muito utilizadas nas ciências sociais aplicadas, e aí são várias, ele mencionou as 3 mais assim, famosas, né? Mais importantes, em ordem, né? De mais incompleta para mais completa, a técnica de diff and diff, ou difference in differences, regressão descontínua e variáveis instrumentais. E o principal questionamento que vai orientar é: você tem um grupo de controle com os dados? Você tem acesso ou não? Então, essa é uma questão que norteia a utilização dos dados.
So great. So we have a lot of methods, great methods here, but why care so much about causal inference?
Turn on your mic.
Sorry, yeah, that's a very good question, and the way it is growing and becoming big, not just in the research space, but also in the policy space, all over the world, I would think mostly in developing countries, one would like to think, why care so much about causal inference, right? Also because, different fields in social science have other methods also to talk about how the world really works. That's a big question everyone is after, right? So why so much fascination with the idea of causal inference? First, at the outset, I like to believe that causal inference is not everything that's out there. There are other methods that one should be humble to and appreciate as well. But that said, causal inference has its strengths, deep strengths. So I'll talk of this from 2 perspectives. One is from the perspective of research, and the other is from the perspective of policy. Okay, so from the research perspective, all that in research we try to do is we try to answer questions about how the world really works, right? And in the field of quantitative economics, we typically try to estimate relationships between variables, right? And when we say variables, there are underlying research questions, right? So will improving education, will it increase income? Will improve education by 1 more year? How much income will it help increase, or how much consumption will it help increase? Those kind of questions. Or bringing politicians through reservation for those who are from disadvantaged groups, will bringing them into politics, will it help their groups benefit from the policies, right? And if so, how much? So one is you want to understand the direction of relationship. Is it from education to income or income to education? Is it from motivation to your health, or you being healthy makes you more motivated, right? So all these kind of relationships. The other is about the magnitude of the effect. It's not just about direction that we care. When we think of causality, we typically think of an arrow going from X to Y, right? But there's also magnitude involved in it, because that has a strong policy implication, right? So when we try to get at both direction and magnitude, we are trying to understand the ways of the world, not just from theory, which has been the bedrock of economics for long, and various other fields, but also we try to, causal inference is all about using the real world data, right? So we use evidence and data to understand the realities of the world, which can vary from context to context. So instead of arguing over, and instead of being limited just with a theoretical understanding of the reality of the world, we rely on real-time data, we rely on the context-specific data, because the same giving money to a poor family can result in different behavior in Nepal or in US, right? So it could be context specific as well. There's no one underlying theory that would define how giving money to poor families will change their behavior, right? Then there's a policy aspect attached to it. So one is a research aspect, the other is a policy aspect. When we come to policy, you can imagine there's so much money that's being spent on every other program that government plans for its for its economy, for its society, or for that matter, even donors, international donors, domestic donors that spend so much money on so many different programs, right? And if we don't clearly understand what will work and what will not work, in what scenario, in what context, for instance, do we just need to give money in the hands of disadvantaged individuals, or do we also need to give them some sort of training, right? Is money enough, or is there a complementary training effect that we also want to sort of have, right? So when there's so much of money, for instance, in Brazil itself, you had this carbon emissions program called ABC, in around late 2000s, in 2010, where $1.7 billion was spent to promote environment-friendly agricultural practices. But apparently that didn't work out for long. I don't know what's the status today, but there was a report in a leading journal that said that it did not work out well because of the way it was received by farmers, right? So when so much of public money, so much of resource is at stake, it's important that we have, we're grateful that we have a field like causal inference that can help us get at the true relationship, that can help us make improvisations while we are doing these kind of interventions with so much resources involved, and try to minimize any cost, any losses that could be occurring due to our wrong understanding of the true workings of the world, right? Yeah. So Marcos, it's your handing over the baton to you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to summarize. Bom, então, sobre a sua pergunta, assim, por que se importar com métodos de inferência causal, né, Thiago? Porque, basicamente, você tenta decifrar como o mundo funciona. E ele fez um importante destaque que métodos de inferência causal são alguns métodos, mas existem outros métodos, nós temos que ser humildes com relação a isso, mas ele possui várias forças importantes, várias vantagens, né? E ele dividiu em perspectiva para um pesquisador e perspectiva para quem está desenhando a política, né? A política pública. Então, para a perspectiva de um pesquisador, é fácil a gente compreender, porque o pesquisador ele tenta responder como é que funciona o mundo, mas, mais importante, ele tenta estabelecer relacionamento entre variáveis. todo mundo que está assistindo a gente aí possui uma base de dados na sua frente e quer estabelecer o relacionamento entre as variáveis que estão na base. Né? Identificar se tal coisa possui influência, associação com outra coisa, né? Um fenômeno está associado a outro, como está associado. Então, quando você pensa em causalidade, não é só se há uma direção, mas também se há uma magnitude. Qual a magnitude? Se essa magnitude se dissipa depois de um tempo, se ela se fortalece depois de um tempo, e sob quais condições elas são moderadas, né? Elas interagem. Então, os métodos de inferência causal, eles te permitem, baseado em evidência, compreender a realidade do mundo, né? Na perspectiva de quem desenha política, uma política pública, porque muito dinheiro é gasto com política pública, né? Com sociedade, programas, por diferentes governos em diferentes épocas do mundo. Então, as pessoas que desenham isso precisam entender o que ou não vai funcionar, em qual cenário, em qual contexto, né? Porque sempre estamos em um cenário de grandes recursos que são gastos. Então, esses métodos permitem que se identifique, né, a efetividade.
Very, very nice. Show. So, what does the recognition of causal inference do Nobel Prize in Economic Science mean?
Thanks, Thiago. So this, I think, connects well to the previous question on why I care so much about causal inference. And if our audience would have noticed the Nobel Prizes in the field of economic sciences in the past few years, causal inference is one of the areas where Nobel Prizes were handed over, right? So in 2019, remember I told you when I was discussing the methods in 2019 for experimental methods, that is randomized controlled trials, Professor Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo at MIT, who basically are the founders of the Poverty Action Lab, JPAL, they got Nobel Prize, joint Nobel Prize for randomized controlled trials methods, right? And then in 2021, 2 years after that, 3 Nobel Prizes were given in economic sciences to celebrate, the popularity of quasi-experimental methods because of these researchers. So one was David Card. David Card primarily got it for his research on labor market as well, which maybe I can talk at some point. But then the other 2 researchers, so David Card is at UC Berkeley. The other 2 researchers are Joshua Angrist at MIT and Guido Imbens at Stanford. So they got Nobel Prizes for making quasi-experimental methods, popular. And as I mentioned in your previous question, the relevance of quasi-experimental or causal inference methods has become so popular, not just in the field of research in economics specifically, but also in the policy space. Okay, to give you an example, I before working at IIT Gandhinagar, I used to work in a research organization, as I mentioned in the beginning, and our job was to work with government officials, right? And in 2019, I was still in that job, and after Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo got Nobel Prizes, it was not very difficult for us to reach out to policymakers to help them understand the value of causal inference, the value of randomized controlled trials, because now they have seen it all through Nobel Prizes are popular kind of thing, and hence it was easier for us after that award to help the policymakers with whom we were collaborating for many years to help them understand the value of these methods in the policy space as well. And so it has grown quite a bit after these prizes. Yeah.
Bom, ele falou sobre a penetração, né, desses métodos e como eles foram popularizados depois de premiações, Prêmio Nobel para economistas que utilizam esse método. Especificamente em 2019, Esther Duflo Esther Deflo, desculpa. E o Banerjee, eu não esqueci o primeiro nome. What is the first name of Banerjee, Deepak, from MIT? Please turn on your mic.
Sorry, Abhijit.
Abhijit.
Yeah.
Okay. Abhijit, eles ganharam o prêmio Nobel e eles são responsáveis pelo laboratório de pobreza, de combate à pobreza, né, os estudos de pobreza do MIT. Em 2021, 2 anos depois, 3 prêmios foram entregues a pesquisadores que utilizam esses métodos. Inclusive, eles são autores de livros famosos, né? Porque,
que legal.
até para contextualizar, foi uma grande ruptura na área de economia, quando esses métodos foram popularizados, porque eles, de certa forma, permitem preencher uma lacuna que os economistas não conseguiam antes, né? Que é você responder o efeito sem efetivamente estar fazendo um experimento.
Incrível. It's incredible. Thank you very much. Could you talk for us some popular examples of causal inference, please?
Right. So since we were talking about David Card, who got Nobel Prize, in 2021, let's start with his example.
Ele caiu. Será que ele caiu ou congelou?
Acho que ele caiu, Acho que ele caiu.
Ele estava falando sobre o David Carr.
Vamos esperar um pouquinho para o professor voltar?
Sim.
Boa.
E aí, só fazer um destaque...
Tá muito legal, hein? Muito massa, hein, mestre?
Só fazer um destaque, esses métodos popularizaram na economia e eles são oriundos da economia e tem várias pesquisas que estão aplicando esses métodos na área de estratégia, na área de marketing.
Am I audible? Sorry.
Yes.
Did you lose me?
Yep.
Come back. Yeah,
You're back.
Yeah.
I'm back.
You're back. It's freezing again.
It froze again.
Let me turn off my Wi-Fi. I hope my...
Okay.
Okay.
Is this fine?
Yes, I think you're back.
Is this fine? Can you hear me?
Yeah, the image is not quite blurred, but we are listening to you. Something happened with your camera.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. It's funny. I've just lost my phone. Connectivity.
Putting off your camera and then turning on again, turning off and on, just to see if your image is.
Can you see me? Can you hear me now?
Oh,
yes.
Great.
Now you're back.
Good.
Great.
Back. Okay.
You were talking about David Carr, right?
Freeze again.
Okay. In the field of labor market. Okay.
Yes.
So until early 90s, economic theory strongly believed that when you increase prices,
Quando aumenta o preço.
Okay. When you increase wages is price of labor, right? The demand for labor should go down. So if you forcefully increase wages, meaning externally, if you force employers to increase wages, then demand for labor will go down, meaning that you will have unemployment, right? And so economists were against government intervention to force the employers to provide minimum wage, an increased wage than a equilibrium lower level wage that market would set. Okay, so there was a strong theory behind this, but David Card, along with his colleague Alan Kruger, did years of research in US particularly to show that empirically that's not correct. Okay, theory might say that yes, there's an inverse relationship, there's a negative relationship between wages and employment, but in real world, what happens is when you increase wages, when you increase, force employers to pay a certain minimum wage, which is above the market equilibrium wage, causal evidence from the real world shows that employment in fact increase. Why? Because workers get motivated when you pay them more wages, right? So that's and there was a lot of resistance in the beginning to this kind of finding, but eventually, the world world of economics got to terms with it, and this is what was found, across many contexts. So, so here we have a very popular example of, how causal inference methods can really, shatter our beliefs in many ways, right? Another interesting, my favorite example is on labor market discrimination. There's this very popular work in US again that shows how, that basically shows, criticizes the existing studies until that study came out, that try to show that how much discrimination blacks face in US market when they enter labor market, right? The amount of wages that they have to forego compared to their counterpart races is pretty big. But then this study comes in and says, well, there's a lot of bias in that relationship that has been estimated in the pre-existing studies, and through a right kind of control variables and regressions, they show that the discrimination is not in the labor market that blacks face. They face discrimination more in the education market. And that discrimination is what really affects, the relationship quite a bit. And what they propose is that the policy should be rather focusing on in improving the discrimination in the education market way early in their lives than in the labor market, right? So similarly, there are many areas, cash transfers, for instance. Should you give cash to poor households to improve their lives? Or should you transfer in-kind, food packets, for instance, to them? Should you give cash unconditionally, let them decide whatever they want to do with that money? Or should you give that cash conditionally, that they have to spend on education of children, health of children, right? During COVID, for instance, many governments were giving out cash to poor families. Some were giving out food packets, right? So what works the best, right? We might have our own preconceived notions about giving cash, but mind you, there have been very interesting studies, for instance, in Kenya, that shows that giving cash is not bad after all. People don't use it in bad, ill goods like alcohol or other such things that you would ex ante believe, right? Similarly, in the areas of migration, in the areas of female labor force participation, corruption, for instance, marriage markets, there's, it's endless. The amount of, the number of fields where causal inference method has entered is really endless. And, one can talk about it, all day and still not be done with it. One final point on that, in recent years, a lot of novelty has come into using data, in a very articulate manner to get at causality, causal relationships. For instance, researchers have been using cell phone data sets, satellite data sets, along with machine learning techniques to, further improve their learnings using causal inference methods, because it is hardly 3 decades old, and we are still improving upon our learning on these methods. Yeah. So I think I've spoken a lot on that, Marcos. I hope you hear this.
Yeah.
Yes, I read the paper, so I saw them in your course. So I'm going to be able to briefly explain. Como exemplos práticos, né, ele falou por alto assim de 2 grandes exemplos. O primeiro é do David Carr, um estudo na área do mercado de trabalho que praticamente revolucionou a forma como os economistas observavam as políticas públicas, porque até mais ou menos 1980, pela relação entre preço e demanda existente, que é uma relação negativa, os economistas imaginavam que se você aumentasse a renda individual, a demanda por trabalho iria diminuir, né? E aí você teria uma menor demanda por trabalho, mais desemprego, né? Então, os economistas, em geral, eram contra governos instituírem a renda mínima, né? Assim, um dinheiro básico para as pessoas se manterem, né? Assim, as pessoas mais desfavorecidas. E aí o David Carr, ele elaborou anos de pesquisa nos Estados Unidos e empiricamente ele mostrou que isso não se aplica, né? Então, com dados do mundo real, ele identificou que quando há uma intervenção dos governos acima do equilíbrio de mercado, no sentido de aumentar, né, a renda individual, você tem um aumento também, uma diminuição nas taxas de desemprego. Assim, por quê? Porque os trabalhadores ficam mais motivados, que era uma variável não observável ali que estava nessa questão. Então, isso, de certa forma, mudou com métodos de inferência causal, e isso mudou a forma como se estabelecia políticas públicas, né? Um segundo exemplo é sobre a discriminação no mercado de trabalho, e os autores procuraram identificar por que a discriminação acontece no mercado de trabalho norte-americano com indivíduos negros, e aí as abordagens de inferência causal identificaram que não é no mercado de trabalho que ela acontece, né? É um reflexo do que acontece nos anos iniciais, né? Lá nas escolas, na escolha das escolas, e isso vai acabar sendo refletido anos depois. Então, a política tem que ser direcionada para os anos iniciais de estudo, não necessariamente para o mercado de trabalho, né? E os métodos de inferência causal, eles vêm pautando discussões importantes assim, em política pública, como os governos devem transferir dinheiro diretamente para pessoas desfavorecidas ou dar voucher. E se houver transferência do dinheiro, ela tem que ser livre ou deve ser condicionada ao gasto? Como, por exemplo, olha, eu vou direcionar esse dinheiro para você, mas ele vai ter que ser gasto com educação, gasto com saúde, ou não deve ser condicionado, né? Existem estudos no Quênia que já mostram que, não necessariamente, contrariando o senso comum, né? Assim, se você der dinheiro para as pessoas mais favorecidas, elas vão gastar com álcool, né? E cigarro. Não necessariamente isso acontece, né? Elas não vão mas algumas pessoas gastam, mas isso não acontece com uma grande proporção dos cidadãos. Então, os métodos inferenciais estão ajudando a responder essas questões.
Great, great. So we talk about examples of causal inference, yeah, but what the most different methods of causal inference?
Right. So different methods, I've covered that earlier, Thiago. And if you want to repeat, basically, there are three baskets of methods that one can think of when one thinks of causal inference. One is the non-experimental methods, that is the traditional methods where you start with simple descriptives, comparing the treatment and the control group on simple averages, plotting your bar graphs, and even running simple regressions, with some rich controls. So it can be comparing, individuals, households, either in the before and after treatment setting, or it could be comparing them, a treated group with a control group, right, without any randomization, right? That's the idea of non-experimental methods. The experimental methods are the randomized controlled trials, also kind of a natural experiments. That's the best, but then that's also expensive. It's not easy to run randomized controlled trials. It's expensive, and there are a lot of, while it has its strength, it is gold standard method, it has its own set of limitations, right? So there are a school of researchers who would not, sort of vouch for randomized controlled trials all the time, right? Because of its own limitations. And then you have somewhere in between, which is also my area of expertise, is quasi-experimental methods, which does not rely on primary data like randomized controlled trials all the time. It does not rely on experiments. Rather, it uses the context to convert into an experiment-like situation. Okay. For instance, something that's out of your control happens. Like, for instance, some sort of natural disaster happens, right? And that is exogenous to you. That's not in your control. And when something like that happens, which is not in your control, then you can try to look at its effect on a host of outcomes on a particular a group of individuals, right? Or let's say, to give you a very a more relevant example, think of, some state in a country splitting, right? When states split, there are new borders that end up being created, right? Now, the households around those new borders, before those borders were created, they were part of an older state. Now, just because a random boundary has been drawn, if it is random, a random boundary has been drawn, they just happen to be on either side of that new border, right? But so the only difference between those households is the new border, but otherwise they are the same kind of, on average, they would be similar households otherwise, right? So here you have a treatment which is the new state, households who got to the other side of the border and ended up being part of the new state, versus the households who continue to be part of the old state, is the control households. And you can compare these households right around the border, and there you have your causal inference. And you won't be worried about all the omitted variables, all the biases, other things that could be driving the relationship, because that gets taken care of just because of this natural boundary that is drawn between these households. I hope that. So that's one of the methods I'm talking about. I'm not naming the method, but just just the example. Yeah.
Então, um destaque, ele aprofundou um pouco daqueles métodos que a gente tinha comentado no início, né? E agora ele focou muito na regressão descontínua, que é uma técnica relativamente nova, bastante usada, em que você, por meio de alguma influência exógena numa realidade, você tem acesso a dados fronteiriços, né? Que mostram que, determinado grupo de cada fronteira, ou a observação de cada fronteira não passou por esse tipo de intervenção, enquanto o grupo de lá passou. E aí você consegue comparar essas observações, os níveis médios dessas observações, por meio dessa influência externa. Ele também destacou a importância da lógica e da interpretação da questão da existência de um grupo de controle, ou você tentar criar ou identificar um grupo de controle, e essa identificação vai permear as diferentes técnicas que são usadas na sua área de atuação.
Very interesting. I've never heard about regression discontinuous. Yeah, it's new for me.
Yeah, it's a beautiful method. It's actually fun. It's that method you can just do your causal inference just on images. It's a method just full of images. Of course, you have to get to regressions to make your research more robust, but otherwise it's just method of images. Yeah.
I will study it. Yeah. No. Yeah, but I have a nice question to you. Yeah. Let me think about. We have seen a lot of methods that's called black box, yeah, and you don't have easily explain about what happened, yeah, like neural networks and similars, and with a lot of shapes, yeah, and how the causal inference could contribute to these methods to explain what happened with these shapes, a lot of shapes and black box methods.
Okay.
It's a good question, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, although I'm not completely familiar with the method that you're talking about. But if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is basically there are, various relationships where there's a lot of black box involved and we don't know much about it, right? We don't know what is going on behind that relationship, right?
Yeah.
So I must confront here outright that even causal inference method has such scenarios where, it's hard to say everything about a relationship, right? For instance, think of a study, which is my area of work as well. Think when you have reservation for women, because women are a highly disadvantaged set of groups in Indian setting in my country. When you think of women, in 90s, a law came up in India that, gave reservation status to women in local governments, meaning that, they reserved 33% seats for women in local governments in the head positions, right? Now, you would immediately assume that, oh, now that they have brought into power, they will try to change things, right? Well, there have been studies that show that, yes, they change things in favor of women citizens, but at the same time, a lot is not known how that happens. The process is not very clear yet. We know that women reservation happened, and we know that we see the policy outcome. But in between, what happened? How this change has come about? What processes are happening at village level, at local government level? That is not clear. That's black box. So, so causal inference has its own limitations. That's true. But then that's true of any sort of inference method, and that's what makes it interesting, right? Yeah.
Ele destacou do seu questionamento sobre caixa preta, né? Que os próprios métodos de inferência causal eles sofrem e podem sofrer com essa questão. Ele deu um exemplo de políticas voltadas à liderança feminina lá na Índia, de governança local, em que, embora às vezes o método causal consiga identificar um efeito, mas os processos, né, em que isso acontece, ou às vezes o que eles chamam de efeitos, né, às vezes possui um efeito benéfico por um lado, mas acaba ocasionando em outras implicações negativas de outro. Esse caso especificamente da Índia, mais participação feminina, a política gerou mais participação feminina, mas, por outro lado, ela diminuiu a percepção de que a política é efetiva, né? Justamente por uma condição, uma característica cultural da Índia, né? Eu conheço esse exemplo que ele está discutindo, nós temos alguns projetos lá. Então, os próprios métodos de inferência causal, eles, às vezes, têm essas questões de caixa preta no seu âmago, por assim dizer. E eles também passam por algumas dessas limitações.
Yeah. I have more one nice question. Yeah.
Okay.
So, when you think about Simpson's paradox, yeah, when the variables change this behavior, yeah, how the
Qual paradoxo, Thiago?
Paradoxo de Simpson.
Ah, tá, Simpson paradox.
Yeah, Simpson paradox. How can inference, causal inference, helping to identifying paradox, Simpson paradox? It have to have how to identify.
Deepak, you there? Ele parece que congelou.
Acho que essa foi pesada, hein?
A pergunta foi tão pesada que desconectou.
Sorry. Yeah.
We were commenting that the question was so
difficult,
tricky that it froze you.
Yeah. Can you please repeat your question?
So let me try to formulate it. When you think about Simpson paradox, yeah, when the variables change your behavior, yeah, how can causal inference contribute to identifying
right
Simpson paradox?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, I think, and that's where causal inference becomes very important because I don't know. As much as I understand, Simpson paradox is basically, the relationship that you're estimating changes as soon as, you look at a different formation of groups, right? And causal inference is precisely that, right? Causal inference is basically, it forces you to carefully look at all the possible ways in which, the causality that you're trying to prove might falsify, might get broken up. So if you pick, good set of papers from good journals, right, you will see they don't just show an effect, a particular relationships between two variables, for instance, education and income, or giving money and some sort of household behavior, right? So they won't just show that kind of relationship from one particular analysis. They will do, good enough work for you to prove, or try to prove at least, that there is no Simpson paradox, or there is, at least we shouldn't be worried about Simpson paradox in these kind of relationships. But there are some very interesting, big questions, such as, whether decentralizing, the type of government, when you move from autocratic regime to decentralized regime, which was my PhD thesis, whether that affects public goods and services positively, or is it the other way around, where the public goods and services affect moving from autocratization to, democratization? So some big questions, maybe Simpson's paradox would still be there, but in many causal inference studies, at least the good ones, you will see they show you from all angles to also account for an issue like Simpson's paradox, which is a very interesting phenomenon. Yeah.
Tiago, acho que você pode falar um pouco rapidamente sobre o paradoxo de Simpson para quem está acompanhando a gente. Eu faço a tradução em cima.
Bom, o paradoxo de Simpson ele acontece quando você tem uma variável e na presença de outras variáveis ela se comporta de uma forma diferente, né? Então, uma terceira variável ali pode estar influenciando naquele fenômeno, né? Então, por isso que eu perguntei associada à causalidade, né? Será que alguma técnica de inferência causal poderia detectar isso? Porque é muito experimental, né? Você coloca ali uma variável, experimenta e tal, o que está causando uma em relação à outra. Então, eu acredito, eu pensei que isso pudesse contribuir de alguma forma. Agora, eu confesso que eu não entendi muito bem o que ele fala. Que ele deu de resposta?
Não, deixa eu te vou dar um destaque em cima das técnicas e dos métodos. Vou dar um exemplo. Vamos pegar, por exemplo, uma técnica de criação de grupo, né? Em que você identifica dois grupos presumidamente iguais para comparar o efeito de algo. Quando eu falo presumidamente, você pode fazer testes estatísticos para saber se esses grupos são estatisticamente iguais para todas as outras variáveis. E aí, se eles são estatisticamente iguais para todas as outras variáveis, eles, de certa forma...
paradoxo, sim.
Exatamente. Então, essas técnicas se... E aí, a resposta dele foi nesse sentido, né? Então, quando você pega um paper, uma pesquisa que utiliza os métodos de inferência causal, esse trabalho de base, antes de chegar na inferência, ele é feito.
Pô, maneiro. Bem legal.
So causal inference is basically about, getting away from the problem of reverse causality as well, which is what Simpson paradox is also about, right? Or, the effects being present only in certain instances and not throughout, right? And that's why, you have so many researchers, economics field, the number of researchers has outgrown so much in the field of causal inference. It helps us learn a lot from different contexts, different settings, and perhaps helps us get away from Simpson's paradox as well. Yeah.
So Rodolfo asked you, Professor, can we finally prove or not using causal inference if economics theories are true?
That's a very good question. Well, see, one thing, this is what I always tell my students, is that ultimately economics is a social science. It's not pure science. There is no absolute truth. Okay, and all we try to do in either of these, through either of these methods, either of the research, both qualitative and quantitative, by the way. Even qualitative research has its own strengths, while quantitative research has its limitations, right? So all kinds of research, they try to get closer to the truth, but we can never get to the absolute truth. Nobody can, right? And so causal inference basically helps us, shed light upon what we don't know, right? But it does not completely bring out the animal behind the curtain, right? I don't think in social science that's ever going to be possible. Why? Because the human behavior, the world itself is constantly changing, right? You can never expect to have a truth that will stay forever as it is, now you have chat gpt. The technology has completely changed. At one time, we didn't even have mobile phones. Now mobile phones are there, laptops are there, internet is there. Technology is changing every day, countries are changing every day, people are changing every day, right? In that kind of situation, you can't expect a final truth to be there. So there's no theory that is forever true, right? That's the only theory, I think. That's the only true theory is that no theory is ever the final truth.
Okay. It's an amazing class. Yeah, thank you very much. I would question you about resource to learning, causal inference. Could you appoint for us, please?
Yeah, great. So since this is sort of an introductory conversation, and I also, the kind of students I face in my institute are from different backgrounds, all interdisciplinary students. So I keep searching for materials that I can use for sort of non-technical audience, those who are not familiar with the, very deep regression, econometrics, or statistical concepts. So some references that I have been able to gather that even those who are not from the field of economics or econometrics can understand to get get them started into the field of causal inference. So one is, there are three interesting, and these are all free resources, by the way. Okay, I will also talk about one final resource which is not free but a very strong one. So there are three interesting handbooks, kind of documents that have been produced by World Bank with some leading economic researchers. So you just search for Marcos. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. You were talking about the resources when.
Yeah.
Marcos, can you hear me now?
Yes. You were talking about the resources when the connection.
Yeah. So from World Bank, there are three interesting resources, and these are free. Just search for Handbook of Impact Evaluation. That's one. Okay. The other one is Impact Evaluation in International Development by Paul Glewwe, GLEWWE. So Impact Evaluation in International Development. And the third one is Impact Evaluation in Practice by Paul Gertler, GERTLER. So these
all
are
of three books.
These are all these are like online PDF resource available in like book format, and they also have practice sessions. They try to make this accessible to non-technical audience. Okay, so very interesting books. Some of these are you'll definitely enjoy reading some of these. If you want a proper textbook, then you should, the one that I follow with my students is The Effect book, THEEFFECT, The Effect. So the website is called The Effect, okay, and the book is available freely. It's by Nick Huntington, okay, Nick Huntington. So just search for The Effect book on Google and you will find it, okay. So that's chapter by chapter, a very interesting, easy to read book, okay. Another one that has recently come out, I have not checked that yet. So like I told you, this area is mushrooming and a lot of researchers are coming into the field and trying to make things accessible to people. So Causal Inference for the Brave and True. It's a very nice title of a book, Causal Inference for the Brave and True. This is by Matthews Alves. I have not looked at it yet, so I can't comment on whether it is for technical audience or non-technical audience. Okay. If you're a technical person from the field of econometrics, then you should definitely, the Bible of, I would like to say, Causal Inference book is the Nobel Prize winners Angus and his co-author Pishke, Mostly Harmless Econometrics. Okay, Mostly Harmless Econometrics. Then another free book online that's also a bit technical but very good resource is by Scott Cunningham. He also has a nice blog and he interviews a lot of popular economists every now and then. Okay, so that book is called Causal Inference, the Mixtape. it's like the mixtape. Okay, so Causal Inference mixtape, that's also a good book. Okay. Finally, you can search for a lot of online classes by Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, for instance, on MIT, the open resource, right? Other universities also have their open resource, classes available. I think Duke has it. Okay, so these are some resources, free resources that one can sort of, access to understand, to get started with causal inference methods in a simple manner. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very nice resource. Yeah. We will put on the
Só um destaque rápido, Thiago, antes de
vídeo,
você
okay,
fechar.
Okay.
Ele destacou vários livros, né, alguns do Banco Mundial. Ele falou um muito famoso, que é o Mostly Harmless Econometrics, que é um livro assim, handbook para quem trabalha com econometria aplicada, eu recomendo também. E um livro que se chama Causal Inference, The Mixtape. Alguns desses livros, eu não sei se é o caso do Mixtape, mas eles são abertos, inclusive os códigos, né? Então, as bases de dados. Então, fica aí a recomendação para todos que estão nos acompanhando.
Boa, sensacional. Então, agradecer mais uma vez aqui, né, o mestre Severo por estar aqui assessorando, né? Bom demais, é sempre
prazer.
Sócio aqui,
sócio do canal.
10
muito
vezes,
orgulho.
já tem 10 vídeos aqui, mais de 10 vídeos aqui com o mestre Severo no canal, né? E thank you very much, Deepak. Return whenever would you like? Yeah, it was a really pleasure have you with us. Yeah, and thank you. And you are welcome to return here whenever you want. Yeah, thank you very much.
Acho que eu sou caído.
Acho que ele clicou errado. Porque não congelou.
Eu notei, ele estava meio congelado, mas aí qualquer coisa eu comunico para ele que nós encerramos com agradecimento, que ele acabou caindo.
Tranquilo. Beleza, então, mestre. Brigadão. Tamo junto.
Obrigado, Thiago. Estou à disposição sempre.
Valeu.
Espero contribuir com o canal. Um abraço a todos.
Foi muito show aí. Vou depois procurar esses repositórios aí. Valeu, um abraço.
Maravilha.
Valeu,
Até
pessoal.
mais.
Obrigado aí pela presença. Tchau, tchau. Falou.